You go. For memory purposes, we'll go over the plagues again because it's been a while since y'all have been in the little class. For some of y'all, it's been a while since you've been in the little class and had to learn the 10 plagues. So let's go over. What's the first one? Water to blood. What's the second one? Frogs. What's the third one? Lice. What's the fourth one? Flies. After flies? The cattle. After cattle? Boils. And then hail. And then after the hail, locusts. And what's left by this point? Yeah, there's not much left of the land. And so the next one is going to be darkness. And that's where we'll pick up today. We're in chapter 10 and verse 21 is where we'll start. Anybody have anything they want to say before we get into the material tonight? All right. So this plague doesn't have a lot of information given with it, but it is pretty neat to try to figure out how this went down. And there may be a couple of options here. Y'all might have some thoughts on this. So it says, Then the Lord said to Moses, Stretch out your hand towards heaven, that there may be darkness over the land of Egypt, darkness which may even be felt. I've tried to imagine what that would be like. I've only got a couple of experiences in life that I can relate to this, that I think, ooh, I can imagine it being like this. One, I took a photography class in high school, and we had the dark room. And when you were working with color photography at that point, you had no light. You couldn't have a red light on or anything in there. When you're doing black and white, you could have a red light on. But when you're doing color, you couldn't. And it was, I mean, no matter how long you were in there and tried to let your eyes adjust, they would never adjust to it. No matter, you could put your hand right here and move it, and you knew you were doing it, but you couldn't tell. Other experiences that I've had similar to that, you know, you go on a cave tour, you get to the back of the cave and they turn off the lights and let you experience that for a few seconds. And that's pretty cool for a few seconds. That's not pretty cool for 24 hours or 72 hours, or it would be terrible. Darkness that could be felt. And so Moses stretched out his hand towards heaven, and there was thick darkness in all of the land of Egypt for how many days? 3 days. Now, the interesting thing is, verse 23 says, They did not see one another, nor did anyone rise from his place for 3 days. But all the children of Israel had light where? In their dwellings, yeah. So this raises a question in my mind. Was it that there was darkness everywhere, but inside the children of Israel's houses it was just light? Or, in other words, that's possible. That's not the way I've envisioned it, but that's possible, and that wouldn't be any less amazing than some of the other occurrences that are taking place at this point. Or is it the idea that in the land of Egypt there was no light? I'm not talking about just daylight. There was no light. Nobody's night light was working. Nobody's flashlight was working.
Back in that old, undoubtedly whatever God done to the old, you couldn't light in the Egyptian side.
Yeah, so that's the way I envision this. Now we're not giving the details on that, but I envision that
there was no way to get any. Yeah.
There was no way to get any. And so the reason the Israelites had light in their houses is they were able to light their lamps, but the Egyptians, nothing would illuminate. Now, I don't know that that's the way that it happened, but I do know that they were in darkness and the children could see. So the children of Israel could see. Y'all?
Can you imagine that it was so dark? You know, a lot of times, I mean, I woke up in the middle of the night, and you know where everything's in your house, and even though you don't have no light, you can maneuver because you know what's there. But can't you imagine that it's so dark that even if you tried to manage to go, you'd either run into a wall or
Yeah.
I mean, piece of furniture.
Yeah.
I mean, it would just be impossible.
So when it's really like the power goes out or something, you don't have anything, anything illuminated in your house, you know how easy it is to get disoriented in your own house? It's like you're walking to the bathroom and you think, okay, the wall ought to be, boom, there it is. and that's, you know, can you imagine that this situation? It's everywhere like that. You know, it's just
But
constant.
it's usually easy to manage unless your spouse has moved furniture.
Yep, that's right.
It's not there.
That's right. Now, Pharaoh called to Moses. And so, again, we've talked about these poor guys that get sent from Pharaoh through the hailstorm to go get Moses, or here through the darkness to go get Moses, and say, go serve the Lord. But then what does he say? Yeah, only let your flocks and your herds be kept back. Let your little ones also go with you. So here it's like, okay, you can take the people, but you got to leave something behind as assurance. And how does that work? You're negotiating here with God. You're trying to compromise with God. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. You want to pick up there? I'll end up hogging the whole thing.
All right. But Moses says, you must also give us sacrifices and burnt offerings, that we may sacrifice to the Lord our God. Our livestock also shall go with us. Not a hoof shall be left behind. For we must take some of them to serve the Lord our God, and even we do not know with what we must serve the Lord until we arrive there. So Moses' answer is no, that's not the offer that's on the table. We're not negotiating. He hasn't offered to negotiate any of the other times, and he still is bold and stands his ground here. He says we're taking all of it with us because that's what the Lord has asked us to do here. So in verse 27, but the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he would not let them go. Then Pharaoh said to him, get away from me. Take heed to yourself and see my face no more. For in the day you see my face, you shall die. And I have exclamation marks after those sentences there. So Moses said, you have spoken well. I will never see your face again. So Pharaoh has to come and ask for relief or tries to barter with them. Moses says no. Pharaoh gets mad. And at this point, he says, don't come back. If you ever come back again, I'm going to kill you. Don't ever come back. I don't want to see you ever again. And Moses says, okay, if you ever come back, I'll kill you. Well, Moses says, that's fine. You don't have to deal with me anymore. So that's a little bit different ending to Pharaoh's been the one calling for him over and over. Pharaoh called for Moses and told him to come, and they talked to him. But this one ends in a different way. This one ends with Pharaoh angry, and I don't know what he thinks is going to happen, but tells Moses, don't come back.
Somebody had made the comment in a previous class about how does Moses keep getting access to Pharaoh? You would think every time Moses comes, it's Pharaoh has to hate seeing him come because it's never good news. And so you would think he would just say, bar him from coming. Well, that seems to be what's under consideration here. You have no more access to me. You ever approach me again, I'll kill you. But boy, is this ever an ominous statement that's made here. What Moses says in verse 29, you have spoken well. I will never see your face again. Now, if I was Pharaoh at this point, hearing what Moses, every time Moses has spoken, he's had a lot of punch behind what he says. And he says this, I think I would like, what do you mean? Can you explain that, please? You certainly see Pharaoh's arrogance and pride here, but boy, this statement here, it would have to be chilling for everybody who would hear it. I would think, that's a powerful statement. Anybody have any thoughts through chapter 10? Yeah.
Back to the deep darkness, I think of fall.
Yeah.
Darker. And then they didn't move. Because at first I thought, well, maybe they would venture off towards the Israelites.
Right.
Give them a little light, the glow off
Yeah.
You read it, they didn't move.
Yeah.
And I'm still struggling with the heart of Pharaoh's heart, the Lord heart of Pharaoh's heart. So at some point I would like to elaborate.
Okay. Yeah, I think that is one of the challenges of this whole section is this idea of, first of all, I think it's a challenge for us to imagine somebody as stubborn as Pharaoh. But then sometimes I think we meet somebody and we go, that guy comes close. But the stubbornness of Pharaoh here and the Lord hardening his heart. And when you see something like this and you think, surely he will just give in at this point. But he doesn't. And I don't know what it is. I think for Pharaoh to compromise his position, I feel like for Pharaoh, he probably thinks that's a huge step for him. Like, hey, I'm being more than reasonable here. I'm Pharaoh. I'm God of the Egyptians. I don't have to give you anything except I kind of feel like I'd like to get rid of you. So, okay, I will give you something here, but you can't have everything. And when Moses says, sorry, it's everything or the deal's off the table. And I think that just enrages Pharaoh again. So the hardening of the heart, the Lord hardening Pharaoh's heart or Pharaoh hardening his heart, I think the Lord not compromising hardens Pharaoh's heart. That's my understanding, my thinking that. Back to your point about the darkness, though, and them not moving. A darkness that could be felt. It's just, like Steve was talking about, such a challenge to even maneuver around familiar surroundings or wherever. So you just stay put. And do they have any indication of how long this is going to last? Day 2, what are you thinking? Is this going to go on forever? We can't survive like this. By day 3, Pharaoh's saying, all right, get Moses. Let's negotiate here. And but negotiations don't go well because you don't compromise with God.
All the other plagues that's happening, and this happens, they really don't know what's fixing to happen. It is that dark. You're terrified.
Yes. Yes. That's a great point. Darkness adds mystery anyway. I mean, because our senses are taken away, or at least our visual senses are taken away, and so it seems what's happening. It's frightening. Well, many of us are afraid of the dark because we can't visually see what's going on. Yes, but that point that you're making, the wondering what's about to happen, what's about to take place, and how glad they must have been when it became light again. But unfortunately, a worse plague is about to come. Any other thoughts? Good comments?
When you think about how many times this is, 9 times now this has happened, it kind of reminds me of like, and I don't know, two people in a fight or something, and one whoops the other one or gets him down or gets him and he taps, all right,
Yeah.
I'm done. Are you sure you're done? Yeah. And he lets him go. And then next thing you know, what has he done? You ever seen somebody that didn't know when to quit?
We probably all had a cousin like that.
Yeah, they just keep coming back, and the bigger, stronger one gets him again. And all right, you finished? Are you sure you've had all you want? Yeah, I'm done. And he lets him go, and it just happens over and over.
Yeah.
So he's so stubborn. I think, I don't know another way to word it, but he's so stubborn. His heart is hard here that he just can't stop. He can't just give in and give in that something was more powerful than him.
Yeah.
And was greater than him.
As we move into chapter 11 and the things that are going to be said about the last plague, the death of the firstborn, something that you need to keep in mind, I think the way this is broken up is it's a little bit, at least for me, it's easy for my mind to go in a different direction than what the text I think indicates is taking place here. At the end of chapter 10, I tend to think, okay, the last thing that Moses said to him is, you're right, you'll never see my face again, and then Moses leaves. That's not actually what's happening. Moses is going to have more to say in this same conversation. So Moses hasn't left yet. It's just starting in verse 1 where it says, the Lord said to Moses. It's just giving us some information. And so the Lord spoke to Moses, and we interrupt the conversation with Pharaoh for a second to get this information, and then Moses is going to keep speaking to Pharaoh. So kind of hold that image of Moses still before Pharaoh. That way we don't lose that thought. So, chapter 11 and verse 1, and the Lord said to Moses, I will bring yet one more plague on Pharaoh. Afterward, he will let you go from here. When he lets you go, he will surely drive you out of here altogether. Okay, so what has God been asking of Pharaoh up to this point? Or what has Moses and Aaron been presenting to Pharaoh? And what sounds like is the case there? We need a holiday so we can go worship, and then we'll come back. All right, now what God is saying here, up to this point, God has been saying, but he's not going to let you go. He's not going to go for that. He's not going to go for that. Now God says, I'm going to bring one more plague, and he will let you go. And he won't just let you go like, okay, come back in a week or whatever. He will drive you out. Now that's God's intention the whole time, isn't it? But that's not where God started. God started with something that I mentioned in the first plague that I think is pretty reasonable from God's standpoint. Pharaoh wouldn't think it was reasonable as the king of Egypt over these slaves, but what God is saying is, I did that to be able to show my power. Now it'll come down to he'll just want you out of here altogether, and God wanted them out of there altogether anyway. So it will lead to God's end on that. Do you have anything on verse 1 you'd like to add?
No, but just the Lord speaks to Moses, and however he's doing this, and he says, "All right, I'm fixing to end it. It's they've had their chances, you know. One more. This time it's going to really be."
I take it that this information that we're getting right here in verses 1 through 3 is actually information that God has given to Moses before he approaches Pharaoh, when Pharaoh calls for him because of the darkness. Now, I don't know that. Maybe it's on the spot. As he's standing there, God's revealing this to him. I don't know. But you notice in verse 2, speak now in the hearing of the people, and let every man ask from his neighbor, and every woman her neighbor, articles of silver and articles of gold. And the Lord gave the people favor in the sight of the Egyptians. Moreover, the man Moses was very great in the land of Egypt, in the sight of Pharaoh's servants, and in the sight of the people. Now, this is interesting, because what are the Egyptians thinking now about the Israelites? Let them go. Let them go. And they're pretty willing to do whatever it takes to, make them happy, because they realize what's taking place here. So the Egyptians as a whole seem to be coming around to understanding who Yahweh is, that he's the God that we better try to please. And Pharaoh is not catching on to that at this point as much. But this idea of go to your neighbor and ask articles of gold and silver. What do you know about ancient Egypt as a whole? What do you think of when you think of ancient Egypt? Very wealthy. That's exactly right. And we still have so many artifacts of the tremendous wealth of Egypt at this time. What's amazing is we're about to build a tent that has to be the most expensive tent that's ever been built in the history of the world. How in the world can a bunch of slaves build the most expensive tent that's ever been built in the history of the world? That's right. And go and ask. And what are the chances of the Egyptians just giving their slaves a bunch of silver and gold? Real good after 9 plagues. And so they go, and the people find favor in the sight, the children of Israel find favor in the Egyptian sight. And Moses is highly respected among the Egyptians at this point. Keep all of that in mind. We'll see some things a little bit later on that I think we'll need to reference back to this to maybe understand.
Okay. So Moses is going to lay out kind of what's going to happen here, and then we're going to have some more details about how it's going to happen. But in verse 4 it says, Then Moses said, Thus says the Lord God, about midnight I will go out into the midst of Egypt, and all the firstborn in the land of Egypt shall die. From the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, even to the firstborn of the female servant who is behind the handmill, all the firstborn of the animals. And there shall be a great cry throughout all the land of Egypt, such as was not like it before, nor shall be like it again. Is that against? Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and this is speaking to Pharaoh again. my understanding, the way this
He's
is.
still in the same conversation.
Yeah, still in the same conversation with Pharaoh.
I was curious about that when I was reading.
Yeah, because the breakup there, that information in between may cause us to think otherwise, but I think there's going to be a clue coming up real fast. So if you can envision that, Pharaoh says, I will not compromise on this. You'll never see my face again or you'll die. You're right, I'll never see your face again. One more plague, and it's going to be deadly. And so that's the context in which he's speaking.
And one of the things that's confusing when you actually read that is when man actually went in and put verses and chapters and all that stuff. This was just in the scroll. I mean, it'd just be like you reading a story. There was no stopping point 10 to 11.
Right.
It was just a continuous flow of what was being spoken in front of Pharaoh.
Yeah.
Okay, so continuing on with what's happening here. He said in 4, 5, 6 there, he describes how this is going to happen, the death of the firstborn. And it's going to happen to everyone. He mentions Pharaoh's household, and he mentions a female servant that's working at the handmill. Everyone from the most important to the least important in the land, the firstborn of animals even, are going to be affected by this. And we got down to verse 7 there, but he makes this distinction again against the children of Israel. But against none of the children of Israel shall a dog move its tongue, against man or beast, that you may know that the Lord does make a difference between the Egyptians and Israel. And all these your servants shall come down to me and bow down to me, saying, Get out, and all the people who follow you. After that, I will go out. Then he went out from Pharaoh in great anger. So we have the description here, and it does make sense now that you bring that up, that it's the same conversation. Pharaoh says, get out, and he says, all right, this is what's fixing to happen. And he describes it. And there's going to be the distinction there again. And then Moses is also angry here, that Moses leaves in great anger from the presence of Pharaoh.
Now, I know this is a pointless thought process here from the standpoint of if you were Pharaoh, you would do exactly what Pharaoh did. But putting yourself in this position, knowing that every time Moses, 9 times out of 9 times when Moses has said something is going to happen, it happened just as he said. And now he says that your firstborn is going to die. What would you do?
Whatever it took to.
He still had a chance at this point.
I mean, surely you could humble yourself and say, wait a minute. I can't let my pride and my stubbornness cost me my firstborn. But he doesn't. What do you think everybody else that heard this was thinking? I would think there would be panic among a lot of people in this. This would be terrifying information that I would think of. Let me throw something out there, and we'll try to examine this as we go through and see if this holds true or not. I think that when it's talking about the firstborn, it's talking about the firstborn males, not just any firstborn. The firstborn males have the right of inheritance. When you see a substitute offering given by the children of Israel, later God's going to ask for an offering for the children of Israel because he spared their firstborn, what they're going to give, and then from then on, they're to redeem every firstborn male. And so I think that's what's under consideration here, even though that's not specified. But either way, it doesn't change a whole lot. But just out of curiosity, how many of us in here are firstborns? All right. And if we just took the males out of here, do you see how that would affect this group? How traumatic that would be in this group? And again, there wouldn't hardly be a family that wouldn't be affected by this, And so whether it's the firstborn male or whether it's the firstborn in general, doesn't matter. It would be.
Even to the firstborn of the female servant.
So from Pharaoh all the way down to the lowest, no economic class was going to be spared.
So I'm wondering if all that's happening, since nothing's being spared, it's just, if you're firstborn, and animals, male or female, humans, male or female, firstborn, you're dead.
Yeah, and it could be that. You know, like I said, when he redeems the ones later, animals and it's the sons and the males, but it could be all. And I would not argue that.
That would even make it a more.
Yeah, nothing.
Then
You're right.
when they go, who is this as firstborn?
Yeah,
What's that cow that's over
yeah,
there? He was the firstborn.
yeah, all the way across.
And it's the size of Egypt, even though they've done bought more animals because all the other ones got killed off in the plagues. Couldn't imagine you done spend this large amount of money, not counting the humans part of it, but then all the
Again.
animals get killed too.
Yep.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
So you were making reference to something else a second ago about the firstborn males. So when you say firstborn males, you mean firstborn and male, or do you mean like the first male?
First male that was born.
So even if like he had an older sister.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. No, he would still. Yeah. It would, because he would be the heir, and that's the way that term is typically used, is the heir. And then later on, when we see the redemption, it was the firstborn males. But I could be wrong about that. I just trying to put this. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's the difference between Bob and I, because I would not know the Hebrew to know that it was in the masculine sense. So that is helpful. Thank you. Any other thoughts on through verse 8?
First time you see Moses leave in anger, you have to imagine that he knew Pharaoh was not going to relent, and even though all the other plagues were horrible, he knew that Pharaoh was going to allow this process to happen.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, that's a good point. Very good. All right, so verse 9, but the Lord said to Moses, Pharaoh will not heed you, so that my wonders may be multiplied in the land of Egypt. That's what's been going on the whole time. So why did we need someone as stubborn as Pharaoh in this position? Because God wanted to fully display his power. And we would think that most other people would relent by this point, not this guy. And that's going to give an opportunity for God to show just how powerful that he is. And the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the children of Israel go out of the land, even when he knows what the next plague is going to be. And he knows the severity of it.
You know, you can kind of take that same example that's given there about Pharaoh's heart, and you can use it today. I mean, the whole world, even though they might not profess to know, all of them know that Christ is coming back. And if you're not saved and in the body of Christ, you're going to die a second death, not only a first death, but you're going to die a second death of eternal punishment. And the people, the majority of the world, hardens their heart not to accept Christ's teachings today.
Yeah, so hold on to that point, because I think after we read this next chapter, that point will make a lot more sense. I think in this next chapter is where we really see God put in place a lesson that really becomes effective when applying it to what you were talking about. Yes, sir.
Looking back in chapter 4, when the Lord first came to Moses, and he first came back to Egypt, verse 22, then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord of Israel, Israel is my son, my firstborn. So I say to you, let my son go, that he may serve me. But if you refuse to let him go, indeed I will kill your son, your firstborn. So that was said early on in the conversation, and he was given opportunities. But he said, if you don't heed those opportunities, I will kill your firstborn. Israel is my firstborn. But if you don't, and he gave him all these chances, but if you don't, I will kill your firstborn. And that's the point we've got to now.
Mm-hmm. All right. chapter 12. So the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. So this is, by the way, when this is taking place would be about our March, so springtime, or early spring. This month shall be the beginning of months. In other words, we're going to use this event as the beginning and the start of your national calendar. This is going to be this significant. This exodus, this leaving, this becoming God's people and siding with God and God leading them out of Egypt, coming out of bondage, is going to be the new beginning for you. Hold on to that idea too, because I think you'll maybe draw some connections as we think about our coming to be God's people and coming out of bondage and how it's a new beginning for us. All right, so speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 10th day of this month, every man shall take for himself a lamb according to his house, and the house of his father, a lamb for a household. If the household is too small for the lamb, let him and his neighbor next to his house take it according to the number of the persons and according to each man's need. You shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year, and you shall take it from the sheep or the goats. We always think of a lamb, but it could be a kid as well. It could be a goat. Now you shall keep it until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it at twilight, and they shall take some of the blood and put it on the two doorposts and on the lintel of the house where they eat it. And they shall eat the flesh on that night, roasted in fire, with unleavened bread, and with bitter herbs they shall eat it. Do not eat it raw, nor boiled at all in water, but roasted in fire, its heads with its legs and its entrails. You shall let none of it remain until morning, and what remains up until morning you shall burn with fire. Thus you shall eat it with your belt on your waist, your sandals on your feet, your staff in your hand. So you shall eat it. It is the Lord's Passover. 4. I will pass through the land of Egypt on that night, and will strike all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both man and beast, and against all of the gods of Egypt I will execute judgment. I am the Lord. Now the blood shall be a sign for you on your houses where you are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague will not be on you to destroy you when I strike the land of Egypt. All right, so let's stop right there in verse 13 and break some of that down. You're one of the children of Israel. You hear there's going to be a plague all through Egypt. All the firstborn are going to die. Have you seen the plagues all throughout Egypt at this point? Yes. Have you experienced any of the plagues all throughout Egypt at this point? Yes. That's some of them. Some of them you have been spared from. Some of them you had to endure with the Egyptians. What about this one?
Amen.
I want to be spared of this one for sure. And there's instructions how to be spared of this one. Austin would be at risk here. I would be at risk here. I'm a firstborn. So Austin and I both, in our immediate family, would both have our lives literally on the line on this. So I'm thinking about these instructions that's given. And there's this instruction about, what am I supposed to take?
A lamb.
All right, a lamb. Okay, I'm supposed to take a lamb for a household here. And what about this lamb? All right, yeah, it's unblemished. All right, so what does that mean?
It's got to have no defects.
Nothing wrong with it.
But I like my lambs that don't have anything wrong with it. I don't want to offer one of them. I got an old crippled one out here that's blind too. That one I could live without.
Yeah, but how much do you love your life?
That's exactly right. How much do I love my life here? What else about this thing?
14.
All right, obviously you're not going to be able to guess what order I have these in. Yes, you have to keep it until the 14th day. It has to be a 1-year-old male. Now, if Austin's life is on the line and my life is on the line, do you think I'm going to be pretty careful about this, or can I just be kind of willy-nilly with it? You're going to be very careful with it. I think you would be. I really do. I think at this point, if your faith is that God keeps His word and does what He says, then I'm going to be looking, I'm going to make sure it's a male that doesn't have anything wrong with it, that's a year old, and I'm going to get it on the right day, on the 10th day. I'm going to kill it on the 14th day at twilight. How am I going to cook it? I'm going to cook it with fire. I'm not going to boil it. I'm not going to eat it raw. I'm not going to leave any of it till the morning. I mean, I'm going to follow every one of those things to the detail. Why?
You know, that,
My life is at stake here. This is important.
and I would also go as far to say that any of the families that didn't have either a lamb or a goat, they would took whatever possessions they had to go to somebody that had extra.
You better believe it. That's exactly right. Now, do you know where I'm going with this by emphasizing this? You know what people do with their soul? Now, what did God say about being saved? What do you have to do to be saved? Well, I just don't think that that's that important. I think you could probably do. I don't know why y'all get so hung up on baptism. I don't know what the big deal is about baptism. I don't know why y'all. Because our souls are at stake here, and I believe that God's going to do what He said He's going to do. Because He has a long track record of doing exactly what He said He was going to do and keeping His promises. And so if He gives a detail like that, I'm not going to be the one to say, I don't think that's important. And so faith comes by hearing and hearing by the Word of God. How do you come to have faith to believe that when Peter says, repent and let everyone be baptized, you say, I'm going to repent and I'm going to be baptized? How do you come to have that faith? You come to have that faith by looking at the Word of God and the record that He's given about how He deals, how He delivers His people, how He saves His people, how He expects His instruction to be followed. And so as we study these things, this is how we come to those conclusions when we get to the New Testament that, yeah, I think baptism is essential for salvation. Just like I think it was essential that I don't think you could offer, a crippled female 3-year-old sheep and be saved. I don't think that worked. God gave those details for a reason, and He expected them to be followed.
I also don't think you'd be okay if you were wearing your night clothes, ready for bed.
Yeah, that's right. All of those things were given for a reason. And what we're going to see a little bit, well, I'll tell you what. No, I'm going to save it. What we'll see later on is they paid attention to those details on this occasion. All right, I'm sorry.
Today's lesson we can gain from this is when you give to God, He expects you to.
Yeah. He expects what He says.
No, He does. You mentioned He tells them how to cook it as well, and then what to be wearing while they eat it. It's almost like He tells them to dress as if you're fixing to go on a hike or something. It's not your normal clothes you would eat supper in.
Right.
Eat it with your belt on, your sandals on your feet, your staffing like your walking stick. Who eats standing there wearing all fully clothed like with their walking stick? But that's symbolic of what's fixing to happen there.
I think also the reason that he mentioned all that about what to wear. I mean, when all this hits, they ain't gonna stay around in Egypt because Pharaoh's gonna run them out, just like Monty just said a while ago. He's gonna make them leave. So if they already had their clothes on and they was already prepared to leave, you ain't got to put nothing on. You just got to gather your animals and the gold and stuff as you could leave.
Yep. So the instruction, I'm sorry. Somebody saying something? No? Okay. The instruction that we've seen up until verse 14 has all been to preserve them from the 10th plague that's coming, to save them in this. But then the instruction that we have from 14 on here is looking in the future, how they're to observe this in the future.
Yeah, so verse 14 mentions that. It says, so this day shall be to you a memorial. So what's a memorial? What does that mean? Well, it's something to remember something. You're going to keep doing this. You're doing it right now, but you're going to keep doing this in the future as a memorial to remember what's about to happen. You shall keep it as a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. You shall keep it as a feast by an everlasting ordinance. So this is going to be something that's going to be done. These details, pay attention to these details because they're going to be continued to be done for future generations, it says. And he has some more detail. Anything on that for you? He has some more details about this feast that they're going to carry on with in the future. 7 days you shall eat unleavened bread. On the first day you shall remove leaven from your houses. For whoever eats leavened bread from the first day until the seventh day, that person shall be cut off from Israel. Pretty serious there for breaking that rule. On the first day there shall be a holy convocation. On the seventh day there shall be a holy convocation for you. No manner of work shall be done on them. But that whichever one must eat, that only may be prepared by you. So you shall observe the feast of unleavened bread. For on this same day I will have brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore you shall observe this day throughout your generations as an everlasting ordinance. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, at evening, you shall eat unleavened bread until the 21st day of the month at evening. For 7 days no leaven shall be found in your houses, since whoever eats what is leavened, that same person shall be cut off from the congregation of Israel, whether he is a stranger or a native of the land. You shall eat nothing leavened in all your dwellings. You shall eat unleavened bread.
All right, so some things here that we need to pay attention to. First of all, this was to be something they were to do throughout their generations. This was a week-long, a week and a day, actually, long event. And the 14th day is when they actually ate the Passover meal, remembered how the Lord saved them. But then that whole next week, it was the week of unleavened bread. There was not to be any leaven in there. And this kind of became symbolic of here they're brought out of Egyptian bondage. And that's what they were to remember as the Passover, how the Lord spared them while judging the wicked, spared them, delivered them from bondage. And then there's this idea of this no leaven in your house. What does leaven come to represent from really this point on? We'll see it. It's not that leaven was always outlawed, but it does come to kind of symbolize something. And I think it comes from this, so we can kind of grasp what God was trying to teach here.
Leaven, like it's mentioned in Christ's teachings, the Pharisees and all, and
Yes.
Sadducees, when they were leavened, mean that they were corrupt.
Exactly. So
And without leaven, if you got unleavened, you ain't got no corruption.
that's right. So it comes to represent this corruption, this pollution among God's people. Now, again, God didn't outlaw all leaven. He did for this week. And I think that the idea is you've come out of bondage. You've come out of that. Be pure. And when the New Testament writers refer back to this, they'll use that type of language about being pure. And we'll look at a passage here next time probably that has to do with that.
That's part of it too, because it was a hastily thing.
Yes. Yeah. So the beginning of that idea comes from, hey, we're going to have to leave in a hurry. You don't have time to let your bread rise. And but unleavened comes to represent more than that from this point on with that.
Well, even Christ, he took over the Passover that we do on the first day of the week. He used unleavened bread, which we do today, but it represents Christ's body being pure. Same thing that it did for the children of Israel when they ate during the Passover week, the unleavened bread.
Yeah, Lucas and I haven't managed our time super well, so we're not going to be able to keep this all. I'm not going to blame it on Lucas. I didn't manage the time very well. So we're not going to be able to keep this in one continual package on this. But I do want to say this, that this idea of putting forward this as a memorial for your generations forever on this, what God is doing is he's not just talking about right now. He's not just saying, hey, I want you to remember that I saved you from Egypt. What he's doing is he's setting a pattern. There's a shadow, there's a type that's being presented here of ultimately what he's going to do for the world, how he's going to deliver the world from bondage, and how he's going to purify them to be his people. And I want you to remember this because this is going to come up again. This is going to happen again. You're going to need another Passover lamb to be rescued. And so let's just remember this every year from now until I bring that about. That's what's taking place here. Does that make sense? All right, we're out of time. Thank y'all for your good attention, and I'm sorry we didn't move fast enough to get to the exciting conclusion of the 10th plague, but you'll have to wait till Sunday. Thanks for watching. If you found this video to be beneficial, please follow us on Facebook or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Feel free to share it with others that you feel like may benefit from it. If you need to contact us, please contact us via email at quinn.church@yahoo.com. Also, if you're in the area, we would love for you to come visit with us at one of our assemblies. Have a good day.